Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, stakeholders, partners, esteemed delegates, and to my colleagues, the members of the press and news media. I'm Chika Odua, and I am very excited to begin the next panel conversation. This is actually the very first panel with our international development partners that we'll be having for this prestigious summit. It is now time for us to go deeper in the conversations that we've been having so far at this summit. And that is exactly what we want to do now with this next panel. We want to deepen the conversation. We also want to highlight what needs to be done technically, logistically, and holistically to support Africa's food sovereignty. So at this time, I would like to welcome our distinguished panelists to the stage. I will call their names and they will make their way forward. We have Norway's Minister of International Development, Ms. Anne Tvenerum. You're highly welcome, Norway. The Right Honorable Andrew Mitchell, a Minister of State in the Foreign, Commonwealth, and Development Office of the United Kingdom. You are very welcome, sir. We have Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of International Development for Canada, Ms. Anita Vandenbelt. You are highly welcome. We also have the Assistant Administrator for the Bureau of Food Resilience and Food Security at USAID, Ms. Dina Esposito. You're very welcome. We also have the President of the Islamic Development Bank, His Excellency, Dr. Mohammed Suleiman Al-Jasser. Assalamu alaikum, Your Excellency. And we have Remy Rioux, Director General, l'Agence Française du Développement. Bienvenue, monsieur. So please take your seats and let's welcome this prestigious panel. So we have a lot to discuss in less than 45 minutes, but I would like for this to be a robust exchange of ideas, experiences, and insights. So I do want to encourage our panelists to feel free to contribute as you see fit. So first of all, we all know that Africa needs reliable international development partners to play a role in supporting its agricultural transformation. So our panelists are going to give us some recommendations and strategies on how to strengthen this role for these crucial partnerships. But first, we need to acknowledge the context in which this panel is being framed. So please just allow me to go over the data in just 1 minute. So first of all, Africa has the potential to be the food basket for the entire world. This very continent has more than 60% of the world's remaining arable land. And that includes about 400 million hectares of savanna grassland. And by 2050, Africa's arable land could feed about 9 billion people if the right systems are put into place. But the current reality on ground tells a different story. The continent imports more than 100 million metric tons of food at the cost of $75 billion every single year. 1/3 of the world's chronically hungry people live right here in Africa. It's going to take between $28.5 billion and $36.6 billion every single year to eradicate chronic hunger right here in Africa. I'm sure that you all are very familiar with these figures. So this is the context. This is what is happening on the ground. So I would like for us to speak to this reality and also to speak to the potential. So I'd like to begin with Norway. Honorable Tvenerum, your country recently announced a contribution to help 850,000 African smallholder farmers to access fertilizer. And this announcement came out last week, is that correct? And that's an amazing achievement. Let's just honor that with a hand clap. So can you tell us, Honorable, what is actually driving international investment into Africa's food and agricultural sector?
Thank you very much. It's such a pleasure to be here. And it's so fantastic to sit here and discuss agriculture. To be quite honest, I think it's very strange that that this hasn't taken off long ago. But I think one of the problems up till now have been that parts of the world, especially some of like-minded countries of Norway, have taken some of the global value chains of the food systems and food production for granted. We know that hunger has gone up for a number of years. Even straight back to 2014, SDG 2 has been on the decline, which is terrible. But we haven't really started this discussion until the global food systems broke down, first with the pandemic and now with the terrible war in Ukraine. I think this is a momentum to see agriculture as a business opportunity. You know, we have taken food for granted, but the fact is that the primary sector is a motor for development in Africa, as it was in my country, in the UK, a few decades ago. The business opportunities are there. I see as one of the things I'm trying to do as a donor is to use the relatively scarce aid money to facilitate, to catalyze private investors by de-risking, introducing de-risking mechanisms to make it a little bit easier for private investors to get into the agricultural sector in Africa. What we see is that, okay, yes, there is a risk in certain countries, but the perceived risk is higher than the actual risk, and that is something we all have to work on. The final point I want to mention is climate finance. I feel that with the COP27 in Egypt, there was a lot more attention to food production, food systems, and climate adaptation. I hope that will continue into the coming climate negotiations, because agriculture is it's part of the climate problem, but it's also part of the solution, and climate finance need to assist Africa in climate adaptation and food production. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do have a follow-up question for you, but first I'd like to bring forward our final panelist. He has just arrived. We have the Vice President of Japan's International Cooperation Agency, Mr. Osamu Kubota. You're very welcome, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. So, Honorable, can you speak a bit more to the latest intervention to assist 850,000 African smallholder farmers? How do you actually envision this contribution bringing tangible impact on the ground?
You know, the potential for food production with the right and efficient use of fertilizer is immense. But we also know that the potential loss of production on the African continent due to not accessing fertilizer this coming harvest is possibly some 20%. Now that number is staggering. So what we want to do is, obviously on the short term, we need to get access to fertilizer and get the prices down, or get the subsidies out there. But also in the longer term, we need to use fertilizer in a smarter way. So what we want to do is optimize the use of fertilizer. Fertilizer used in a wrong way is pollution. And it's also a waste of money for the small-scale farmer who invests in fertilizer and doesn't use it properly. So we are going to tailor-make and optimize the use of fertilizer. And another very, very exciting thing that we are doing in collaboration with our partners is that we are going to get data on soil health in sub-Saharan Africa. These are going to be publicly, global, accessible, open data. where we have mapped soil quality on the African continent, making, and with this data available, you're able to tailor-make fertilizer specifically for the soil we are talking about. So it's great for increasing productivity, but it's also great for the environment.
So tailor-made fertilizer, that's incredible. Thank you so much for that. Now let's turn to the United Kingdom. We have the Right Honourable Andrew Mitchell with us. Sir, in your role, you have a particular focus on Africa. And of course, the UK continues to be a leading partner for Africa's development. So sir, from your experience, can you tell us how you think that international development partners can coordinate together to really help to foster Africa's agricultural transformation?
Yes, well, thank you very much, and good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be here in Dakar. I was the British Development Secretary 10 years ago, and I've returned to government after an absence of 10 years. And it's quite depressing in some ways to notice how little the dial has shifted on some of the problems that we're addressing today. But I want to congratulate the organizers of this brilliant conference, President Macky Sall and also President Akin Adesina, on putting this together, getting us all here. And there's a real feeling, I think, at this conference that we can make progress when, as my Norwegian friend and colleague said, we face the aftermath of COVID, we face the appalling war that Putin is waging in Ukraine. And the effect of all of this has been to put back, going backwards, all the dials of the development gains which had been made since 1990, when really the period since 1990 had seen the fastest elimination of poverty in the history of the world. So to your question specifically, we have been in Britain doing everything we can to help both on the immediate issues. I was in Somalia before Christmas, where although the famine has not taken off as we feared, the effects of the drought there are incredibly severe. And we obviously do our best in Britain to try and, along with our international colleagues and the international system, make sure that we address the extent of food insecurity and starvation. But we're very conscious that if you could spend a little bit of the money you're spending on humanitarian relief, on resilience and on climate adaptation, then of course it means that the next time these awful disasters afflict us, there's a degree of resilience there. And the recent examinations of this have shown that $1 spent on resilience and mitigation means that the next time the trouble emerges, you save between $4 and $7 in terms of investment. So on the immediacy, we're doing everything we can to help. Moving up the scale, I think conferences like this get us to focus on the importance of the private sector. They get us to focus on the importance of partnership, working together, the system cohering in a sensible way, and also I think the importance of some of the work that's going on at the moment adjacent to the Bridgetown agenda, where we're trying to work out how to turn what COP in Egypt described as the importance of getting trillions out of billions of dollars of investment. And I think that's an agenda which Britain is extremely keen to drive forward. There are a whole number of ways which we can do that, and a whole series of different forms of financial engineering which help us to do that. But with the growth of availability of money and the growth of technical assistance to help poorer countries access this climate money, then we can really drive this agenda forward. So although I think we reflect today on problems which have not improved as we would have wished, I think there's plenty of optimism around, and I strongly agree with what my Norwegian friend said about the direction of travel. These are all issues which we can grapple with, and I think we can make real progress.
And sir, how important is it to make sure that we are all aligned on the same goal? So from the point of the AFDB, the goal really is 100% food sovereignty and resilience for Africa. So how important should we make sure that we're managing these goals properly?
Well, I think it's incredibly important, but we are all in the same space. We don't all have to do it the same way or in the same manner, but we're all in the same space of wanting to drive this forward. I've mentioned a number of British priorities, but all the priorities have to be in partnership. It has to be a common goal and a common approach, and development done not in partnership simply doesn't work. So we've learned that lesson, hopefully, a long time ago. But we all need to face in the same direction. We need to understand that the critical nature of the private sector. Britain, through British Investments International, is a significant investor in many parts of Africa and in agriculture and in the food industry. The priority which we attach to that and to creating jobs and so on, all these things help us to achieve these common aims. But they are common aims, and we may look at it in a slightly different way, but we're all driving towards the same conclusion.
Thank you so much for that insight. I'd like to talk about food insecurity. The lack of food security in many parts of Africa affects different segments of the population in different ways, and I'd like for us to reflect on this for a moment. Women, children, the conflict in Ukraine. I'd like to turn to Canada. We have the minister from Canada, Ms. Vandenbelt, to talk to us here, and I'd like for you to speak to this point. You are a renowned international human rights expert, and you've done some groundbreaking work for women empowerment. Also, I know that Canada has been very intentional to driving and supporting gender equality across the board. So can you talk about how we can ensure that as international partners continue to support Africa's agricultural transformation, how can we ensure that women and children are not left behind?
Well, thank you, first of all, for what is an absolutely essential and vital question. Je tiens de remercier le gouvernement du Sénégal et la Banque africaine de développement d'avoir accueilli cet important sommet. As you mentioned in your question, Vladimir Putin's illegal and unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine has created a massive additional shock to global food systems, and it has set us off track to meeting SDG 2 on zero hunger. This cost, as we all know here in this room, is borne disproportionately by Africa. And we know that the gender gap in food insecurity is widening. Women, as many of you know, eat least and they eat last. Canada's Feminist International Assistance Policy puts women and girls at the heart of all of our programs and our financing. It's critical to strengthen the resilience of vulnerable households, particularly female-headed households, in order to adapt and recover from the disruptions that we're currently experiencing. Rural women are most affected by poverty, by food insecurity, and by climate change, and agriculture is their primary source of income. Some of the ways in which Canada has been working with our partners in Africa include Women's Voice and Leadership Project in Ghana, where women get access to arable land and financing, or in Côte d'Ivoire, where women producers are able to access credit, agricultural insurance, and techniques to deal with climate change. In Ethiopia, the International Finance Corporation, which is funded by Canada, is providing leadership training for women poultry producers. The Feminist International Assistance Policy works because over half of farmers in the world are smallhold farmers, and a vast number of those are women. Selon une étude de la FAO, si les agricultrices avaient le même accès aux ressources que les hommes, il y aurait jusqu'à 150 millions de personnes affamées en moins. Les connaissances et les contributions des femmes ne sont pas suffisamment reconnues. Leurs compétences sont sous-utilisées. Pour revenir à votre question, les partenaires de développement doivent absolument veiller à ce que les programmes agricoles permettent aux femmes de contribuer à l'évolution du système alimentaire. Il est aussi crucial d'investir dans les agro-entreprises vertes, en particulier celles qui sont dirigées par des femmes. C'est pourquoi le Canada a versé $100 millions à la Banque africaine de développement pour le mécanisme de financement catalytique des PME du secteur agroalimentaire. Ce mécanisme soutiendra la croissance des petites et moyennes entreprises agroalimentaires. Ici, au Sénégal, la Grande Muraille verte de l'Afrique, un projet dirigé par l'Union africaine, introduira des méthodes d'agriculture intelligentes sur le plan climatique et utilisera des solutions fondées sur la nature pour lutter contre la désertification et la déforestation. À cet égard, il est essentiel de libérer et d'encourager l'innovation menée par les Africains, tout en mettant à l'échelle des solutions connues. Pour vraiment libérer le potentiel de l'Afrique en tant que région clé de la production alimentaire mondiale, il faudra des efforts de tous les Africains, hommes et femmes, sur un pied d'égalité. Merci.
Thank you very much. So, Honorable Vandenbel, you mentioned interventions that your country is doing for women and girls in Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Ethiopia. Can you just highlight some of the success stories so far that you're seeing from these programs?
So one of the things about our feminist international assistance policy is that it isn't about women just as beneficiaries. It's about women being an integral part right from the design, the implementation, and all the way through every project. And so what that means is that these are more sustainable, because we know that by tapping into women's knowledge, that there is no way that we can achieve the goals that we're talking about today when 50% of agricultural workers are women, and not including their knowledge, their contributions from the very design stage of any project. That's what that means. It's not just about making sure that women are the ones benefiting.
Thank you very much. And now I want to speak in a more broad sense. Of course, we want to make sure that no one is being left behind. So I'd like to hear from the USAID delegate here. I'd like to ask how America is actually scaling up its efforts to make sure that Africa achieves the transformation in food systems that it's looking for.
Well, thank you very much for the question, and I want to thank His Excellency President Saul and Dr. Adesina for convening us, for hosting us on this really important dialogue, and for the vision that was laid out this morning, which is ambitious but also doable. I think there's a lot of optimism that with the right policies and the right investments, the vision laid out is really possible, pragmatic and possible. I lead the Bureau for Resilience and Food Security at USAID, and in my new role, my first stop was just last week in Southern Africa, visiting Zambia and Malawi. And I was there to really look at how these many covariate shocks, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, high food prices, high fertilizer prices, the extreme climate shocks, and of course COVID-19, which has set us back by decades in terms of poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. But I was also there to really look at the investments that USAID is making on the development side to really fuel the kind of acceleration of progress that we're talking about here. And really, it feels like we're at an inflection point. Both the acute crises that we see, whether we see this famine stalking the Horn of Africa or crises in the Sahel, and then we also see all of the potential that is being laid out in the boardrooms here. And I think that it is that inflection point that really led President Biden to reaffirm our commitment to the African Union and the African nations through a strategic partnership at the African Leadership Summit last December. And that partnership is really twofold. It starts on that humanitarian side, looking to alleviate the worst impacts of the crisis right away. That includes more than $10 billion in humanitarian assistance last year, $2.5 billion committed in December as we work on the impacts and the needs to address those needs in the coming year. But it also has this medium and long-term focus that's really focused on addressing the underlying weaknesses in the system, right? We have this ambition, shared ambition with African nations to have a food system that's not only more productive, but more resilient and sustainable in the face of these climate shocks, more nutritious, more equitable. And that partnership is not just one that is catalyzed by development assistance, as we've been talking about, although it is an important catalyst. And you saw that our Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, was just on the continent calling for debt restructuring. You'll see our U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations arriving shortly with food security on her agenda. We have high-level officials from the Commerce Department coming to the continent. And of course, my sister agencies, the Development Finance Corporation, the Millennial Challenge corporations, all making major and important investments to really fuel the kind of transformation that you're talking about. So that's a little bit of alphabet soup about the US government, but I think it's really important to sort of highlight that when President Biden launched this strategic partnership, he was talking about a vast array of different kinds of support that the United States government can bring to the agenda. And I just wanted to highlight 4 things from the USAID portfolio that I think I wanted to share in terms of our interest in how we can help to accelerate progress on the continent. The first is working with our missions around the world. We sit down country by country and really make sure that our investments are aligned with the visions of those nations. Within that, I'm very confident you'll see that our priorities are increasing the role of the private sector, like so many of you here, talking about farming as a business, the importance of a vibrant private sector. No amount of ODA is going to get the job done. So you're going to see a lot more financing, de-risking of investments from USAID. Our administrator announced at Davos a new $500 million fund that's meant to make it easier to partner with AID as private corporations seek to de-risk their investments. You're going to see us really working with regional bodies and nation states to advance smart regulatory and policy reforms that create the kind of enabling environment that the private sector needs. You're going to see us doing a lot more work to advance gender equity and inclusion. I repeat in English what my colleague said. If women had the same access to agricultural inputs as their male counterparts, 150 million people could be lifted out of hunger. It is worth saying twice. I did hear a panelist not long ago say the closest thing we have to a magic bullet in ending hunger is empowering women. And I think that notion of accelerating change is so important. And finally, I would just say that we've done $1 billion in 100 million, 150 million a year in research and development since the launch of our Feed the Future initiative in 2014. We'll continue to commit to that important R&D investment and hope others will join us in that, and that we are also trying to now, in light of this crisis, really accelerate access to innovative solutions to smallholder farmers. And in that regard, we announced a $100 million new initiative in response to the global crisis that really helps to link up innovations, whether it be improved seeds, fertilizer use efficiency, access to finance, and a variety of other wraparound services, particularly around improved agronomic practices, that we hope will really compensate in the short term, but also deliver a longer term result.
Madam Esposito, I'm curious to hear a bit more about your trips to Zambia and Malawi, right? So you mentioned that COVID actually brought us back decades, right? And that's a very scary reality. Can you talk to us about what you saw on the ground in Zambia and Malawi and how people are trying to bridge this gap and move forward?
Thanks. So we met with some farmers who are telling us that they have moved down to 1 meal a day for their families, because they simply can't make ends meet, and that they are increasingly trying to figure out what sorts of crops might grow without fertilizer. So there's a little bit of a silver lining as people move out of maize and into things like soy, which don't require fertilizer and is a little bit more nutritious and is also good for soil health. So you see both the real downsides as people struggle to make ends meet for their family, and you see opportunity that presents itself out of crisis. So those were 2 things that we saw. We met with a smallholder woman farmer, only 23 years old. She's planting improved soybean seed on her farm. She's going to quadruple her yields. She has a premium price for offtake. And when we asked, what are you going to do with this money? She said, business. And so you see the ambition and the possibility there.
That's great. Thank you so much for those success stories. It's so important to remind ourselves of what is being done. And on that note, I do think that this is a good time to recognize the Islamic Development Bank's contributions to helping Africa's agricultural transformation. Dr. Al-Jasser, there are too many projects to name that you all are doing, too many wonderful projects, but please, can you just give us some of the highlights of the bank's partnership with the African Development Bank and Nigeria to create special agro-industrial processing zones?
Thank you very much, and I want to thank President Sall and President Adesina for the invitation. As you know, the Islamic Development Bank has 57 members, 27 of them are African. So we are very much engaged and involved since the inception of the bank. Over the years, about $11 billion of financing has happened. Looking forward to the next 5 years, we have allocated about $7 billion that will be available. We have also, during the COVID, we had a special program for the member countries, about $4.8 billion. We also have, with the Arab Coordination Group, which is a collection of Arab development institutions, we put together a package for climate, addressing the climate problem that has become a major influencer of the food crisis. About $24 billion, 13 billion of them are by the Islamic Development Bank over the period 2030. So we have been very much engaged. You mentioned the special processing zones. We have collaborated with our partners at the African Development Bank, and it's going very well. And we're going to start also here in the Senegal. We have the south and the north processing zones that are also part of that development. We have also been involved in even smaller projects. For example, about women. We have a program in northern Nigeria where among pastoral society, and that's where women suffer the most. So we had a program where there is some of them that have these entrepreneurial skills, or at least desires, if not the skills. We have gone out, and I went actually in person to see them and to meet with them and to distribute those goats, those that have proven themselves to be able to manage a small business. We have given them goats that they can grow their own family business. We have done, I mean, women, for example, if you take Somalia, somebody mentioned Somalia, there are some villages that don't even have water, and they wake up their daughters to go in the morning 4 hours walking to fetch water for the family. So we had a program where we went to these communities and we dug water wells in the village and built a school next door also. So you can imagine how transformational
That's incredible.
that
Excellent.
is for these communities. And the great thing, I mean, when I went to those pastoral societies, you could read in their eyes. They're just like saying, thank you for remembering that we exist.
Right.
And this is very important, you know, so all of us that are in this business, we should go there and meet with the people and listen to them. Even if we didn't do much, but still just being there means a lot to them, that they are considered to be an important and an integral part of humanity and societies. So we have been very busy. We have been very busy also collaborating with Melinda and Bill Gates and others to fight disease. We have been, for example, one of the programs that we have that is very active is avoidable blindness. We've had thousands and thousands of operations done here in West Africa and other parts. And the doctors, the ophthalmologists are all volunteers from Saudi Arabia, from Morocco, from Tunisia, from many other places. And we do all the logistical parts. We provide that through some grants that we have. And you can imagine. I mean, I was told this story. I thought I would share it because it's really, I mean, I would never have thought about it. They say when you save this person's eyesight, you have saved the life of a girl too. Because usually they would have, if this person is blind or near blind, they will have one of the daughters of the family to be with this person. And so she has no life. She can't go to school. She can't do anything. So by saving that person's eyesight, you've saved the life of another girl also, so she can go to school and do something productive in her life. So we're engaged in so many different things here in Africa and in the rest of the member countries, and we're very, very proud of what we're doing. The only thing I would say is that there is only so much we can do. So all of us need to work together. But more importantly, and I think the presidents in the earlier session, they said it, you know, I think one of the presidents said, shame on us. He said, I think what he meant and what I subscribe to is that we need to make sure that whatever programs, loans, projects are well executed. And we need the governments to support the execution process and get out of the way sometimes, because sometimes they're not always helpful. I'm not talking about the high, I'm talking about the little bureaucrats that create problems. I think this is very, very important because there is a lot of work to be done in agriculture and every other area, and we see it day in and day out. And I'm very optimistic today because of what I heard from the heads of states, and we look forward to really completing this journey and making Africa a leading part of the world, not only feeding itself, but feeding the world, but also in other areas, because I don't want Africa to be just like the food basket. We want it to be a food basket, but to be other things too. Thank you.
Absolutely. And Dr. Al-Jasser, these pastoralists and farmers that you met in northern Nigeria, do you think that they have a sustainable business model in place?
Well, I think they do simply because they're there and you need to help them in whatever, you know, you cannot tell them relocate and go to Lagos or go to Abuja or something. This is their life. So what is it that we can do to alleviate the hardship? So if a young mother with kids can get 4 goats and a kid, you know, so they can reproduce, you know, you could see it in their eyes. I mean, you know, that they have livelihood that they can generate and they can live off. And this is very significant in the lives, because when we say pastoral societies in the northern arid areas of Nigeria, you can imagine what type of a life they have. So this is significant in terms of their lives. And women's empowerment takes really a new dimension that we can help with. And it is not beyond our ability to help.
Thank you so much for that. Excellent, excellent. I'd like to now hear from France. Monsieur Rayou, can you talk about what the agency that you are heading is doing this year to scale up its efforts to support Africa's food systems and agricultural networks across the continent?
Bien, bonjour à tous et merci pour cette invitation. Mon expérience à la tête de l'agence française depuis 7 ans maintenant, j'ai les mêmes images en tête, bien sûr, que le président de la Banque islamique. Mais il me semble que si on veut aller plus fort, plus loin, on a besoin de 3 choses. On a d'abord évidemment besoin d'un nouveau leadership. Et donc, je tiens vraiment à saluer ce qui s'est passé ce matin et qui va continuer dans ce sommet. L'expression des chefs d'État, la gouvernance aussi qui se met en place avec ces boardrooms, ces advisory council, la responsabilité qui est prise. Et puis je veux saluer évidemment l'impulsion de notre ami Akin Adesina, le président de la Banque africaine de développement, avec son expérience de ministre de l'Agriculture, évidemment, qui a proposé ce cadre politique et de référence qui ressemble par certains aspects à ce qu'on est en train de mettre en place pour le climat avec les Just Energy Transition et Just Energy Transition Partnership. Donc ces politiques portées par les chefs d'État et derrière lesquelles tout le monde s'aligne. Donc ça, c'est extrêmement important. Ça ne marche que si on a cet engagement. La deuxième chose, et c'est aussi présent dans cette salle, il faut un nouveau narratif, j'en suis certain, un narratif de souveraineté alimentaire. C'est assez nouveau hein, dans les discussions sur l'agriculture de parler de souveraineté comme aujourd'hui, et c'est très important, je crois. Et puis un narratif d'investissement solidaire. Je pense qu'il faut mettre de côté définitivement le récit de l'aide publique au développement. Je crois qu'on est tous d'accord là-dessus, et se tourner vraiment vers des choses beaucoup plus actives. Et puis un récit d'innovation. Ce qu'on a bien vu ce matin, c'est qu'il se passe en Afrique des choses qui ne se passent nulle part ailleurs. La croissance de la population urbaine simultanée avec celle de la population rurale, des équilibres qui vont être trouvés entre l'agriculture familiale, l'agroécologie, les besoins de formation énormes qui sont derrière cette transformation, et puis plus de rendement, évidemment plus de production pour nourrir l'Afrique et pour exporter. Et puis on voit aussi des grands objets politiques qui sont en train de naître, la Grande Muraille Verte, Monsieur le Président, le programme 3N, on en parlait ce matin, nourrir les Nigériens nourrissent les Nigériens, les forêts, l'initiative des forêts du Congo, Monsieur le Président Tshisekedi, tous ces grands objets politiques, encore une fois, qui vont permettre plus de mobilisation. Et je termine par la dernière chose qu'il faut absolument obtenir, c'est, et j'en parle en dernier, hein, après le leadership et après le récit, c'est une nouvelle architecture financière du financement du développement. Ça a été dit, c'est indispensable. Nous, on l'a vécu à l'Agence française de développement, on a doublé de taille ces dernières années. On a maintenant à peu près 1 milliard d'investissements chaque année pour l'agriculture, et on diversifie nos instruments, c'est-à-dire on a des subventions, on a des prêts, on a oui des outils de dérisking pour le secteur privé, on a de l'assistance technique, et on essaye d'avoir l'intervention la plus précise possible pour répondre aux enjeux. Et puis on n'est pas tout seul, donc il faut quelque chose de beaucoup plus agile et quelque chose de beaucoup plus collectif pour traiter cette défaillance de marché qui est le financement de l'agriculture. Et là, je veux vraiment vous informer et rendre hommage à tous mes collègues, nos collègues des banques publiques de développement. Je pense d'abord aux banques publiques de développement africaines. Il y en a une centaine. Il y a 14 pays africains qui ont une banque de développement spécialisée dans le financement de l'agriculture. Je pense au Crédit Agricole du Maroc, je pense à la Land Bank d'Afrique du Sud, je pense à la Banque nationale de développement agricole du Mali, je pense à l'Ouganda Development Bank, à la Banque de développement du Rwanda, aux banques agricoles de Namibie, du Zimbabwe, de Tanzanie, à la Banque agricole du Sénégal aussi, et avec elle, bien sûr, la BOAD qui est ici, la BADEA, la TDB Bank, la Banque islamique, la JICA, l'AFD, la Banque africaine. Toutes ces institutions qu'on a rassemblées maintenant dans un mouvement qui s'appelle Finance en commun, Finance in Common, et qui est à la disposition de vous, messieurs et mesdames les chefs d'État et de gouvernement, vous, mesdames et messieurs les ministres, pour qu'on les mobilise, et qu'on les mobilise pour mobiliser le secteur privé, évidemment. Dans un deuxième temps, elles ont toujours été là pour ça, et elles sont prêtes à recevoir un mandat beaucoup plus ambitieux. Le président Emmanuel Macron, vous savez peut-être, qui a lancé une initiative Farm pour l'agriculture, qui a organisé un sommet en mai 2021 au cœur de la crise sur le financement de l'Afrique, a proposé d'organiser au mois de juin prochain à Paris un sommet sur cette fois les questions de financement durable, de financement international, de solidarité. On se prépare pour prendre la balle qui sera lancée ici à Dakar et la pousser plus loin à la fin de cette année. Merci.
So it certainly sounds as if your agency is taking a multi-level approach to helping Africa's food systems. So I think that you can share some recommendations. Let's say that there is a development partner that is seeking to bring investments into Africa. How would you recommend that they go about it to guarantee success?
Ce qui manque, il manque des projets. Donc, il faut absolument qu'on arrive à avoir une architecture qui origine, comme on dit dans notre jargon de banquier, beaucoup plus de projets qui peuvent ensuite être financés par des investisseurs internationaux ou des investisseurs locaux ou qui peuvent être présentés au marché financier. Et donc, c'est là qu'il faut joindre nos forces, c'est là qu'il faut mettre les ressources publiques, les fonds de préparation de projets, l'assistance technique, dans les institutions qui seront le plus capables de proposer, de développer des projets en grand nombre et qui ont bien sûr la qualité, encore une fois, attendue pour concilier les besoins de croissance et les besoins de développement durable et d'agroécologie. Donc c'est aussi cette machine, parce qu'aujourd'hui on fait un peu des projets depuis Paris ou depuis Washington ou depuis Bruxelles ou peut-être depuis Washington, on envoie des gens comme ça qui viennent. C'est pas comme ça que ça doit fonctionner un marché financier. C'est les banques locales, les banques privées, les banques publiques qui doivent faire ce travail et qu'ensuite on vient appuyer, compléter, cofinancer pour passer à l'échelle, vraiment, le public et le privé. Donc c'est ça qu'on est en train de construire dans cette initiative et j'espère qu'on pourra dans certains pays africains faire des pilotes pour montrer que ça marche de façon beaucoup plus puissante.
Excellent, thank you so much. I'd like for us now to actually project forward. Let's look at the next 5 years and let's imagine what can potentially happen. So I'd like to ask our panelist from Japan, what is your agency doing, sir, to actually bring investments to support food sovereignty in Africa over the next 5 years?
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to appreciate President Sally and President Adesina for organizing this event, and thank you very much for giving the opportunity to introducing JICA's work here. Obviously, food security is one of the priority areas in JICA, and last year, the Japanese government hosted TICAD 8, Tokyo International Development Conference on Development of Africa, and over the next, and the Tunis Declaration was adopted there, which the declaration include the importance of support to African countries for sustainable agriculture, food system, and value chain development. Following this, with the aim of strengthening the resilience of food sector in Africa, which is facing complex crises such as climate change and malfunction of food system triggered by Ukraine war, JICA has launched JICA African Food Security Initiative. The initiative is to support African food security from 4 perspectives: food availability, food access, food utilizations, food stability. And the total budget of this initiative is 190 billion yen. That is about 1.4 billion US dollars. Under this initiative, we provide a total amount of 40 billion yen, that is about 300 million US dollars, food security emergency support loan, co-financing with AFDB, African Development Bank, supporting the provision of quality seed and fertilizers to make for maize, rice, and soybeans. And for long and more middle and long perspective, in order to improve food availability, we are especially focusing on the rice production of Africa, increasing rice production of Africa. consumption of rice is rapidly increasing, and at the same time, the import of rice are increasing rapidly. And we think it's very important such import need to be replaced by domestic consumption in order to improve the food security in Africa. Since Japan has a rice country and we have accumulated a lot of knowledge in rice, so supporting rice production in Africa is one of the JICA's priority areas. And in this sense, we are promoting CARD initiative. CARD is short for Coalition for African Rice Development. And promoting CARD initiative is one of the major JICA's area in supporting the African agriculture. And second is the nutrition. JICA has launched, in cooperation with all the NEPAD, initiative called IFNA. IFNA is short for Initiative for Food and Nutrition Security in Africa. And through IFNA, JICA is helping to improve the nutrition in Africa.
And sir, if I can just come in on that moment, you mentioned nutrition.
Yeah.
We've been talking a lot about numbers and giving figures like billions and millions and trillions. We've also heard our panelists talk about the need to see agriculture as a business. But we also have to make sure that this is a human right, access to nutritious food. So how can we make sure that the business does not actually conflict with the human right and the need for all to access nutritious food, sir? If you can just speak more to that point, and I can also ask for our panelists to also talk to that.
Yes, I mean, the point of the nutrition we are tackling on is that the food security issue is not only about the quantity. That means only the production. Even the production is enough. The balance of the nutrition. If the balance of nutrition is not good, we don't think that's the food security is achieved. And so in this nutrition project, there is a multiple set of nutrition project works that sometimes to improve, to support the human resource development that can contribute to improve the nutritious, and sometimes to provide technical support to cultivate the more nutritious, to diversify the crops which we think contribute to the improvement of nutrition. And
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I see some of our panelists shaking their heads and nodding in agreement. Any words on how we can make sure that agriculture is not only a business, but a human right as well? Yes, please feel free.
Thank you. Just to take that in a slightly different direction, I think when it comes to international investors, we would really advise that they work as partners with African countries and that they invest in the communities and the people that are around them. That it can't just work for the business, right? It has to work for the nation and it has to work for the people. It's good business, it reduces risks and volatility, it can increase market share, it can be very profitable, but it's also important, right, that we have equitable growth and that everybody benefits from it. And it's not an extractive situation, but actually one that's a force multiplier for economic growth that's more equitable.
Excellent. Mr. Al-Jasser?
Just to add a point, when we studied economics a long time ago and political economy, agriculture was like the starting point for any economic development. Unfortunately, that seems to have receded into the back memory of economists, including myself, until I moved to the Islamic Development Bank. So agriculture, as you said, is like a human right. Agriculture is where the first jobs are created. So when agriculture develops, that means people are on the land and having jobs. There's one country, a member country of my institution, that 75% of the population is rural. So if we really want to help that country, you know where to go. And rural, that means agricultural. So if you help them, they will have jobs, they will settle on the land, and they will have food on the table. And guess what also? They will even start producing extra. So the surplus will go to the urban areas, and then they can continue to the industrialization and all of that. But without this logical sequence that we studied early on, I think we would be spinning our wheels in some of these developing countries.
And speaking to that point, of course, it's very unfortunate that in many countries' development programs and budgets, the allocation for agriculture is quite minute. So just again to emphasize on your point. We only have about 5 minutes left, so at this time I'd like to ask our panelists to please share any words of encouragement on how to foster international partnerships that are very crucial to helping Africa to develop its food systems as we end out this session, please. Please, delegate from Canada.
Yes, thank you. While the challenges right now are great, I think that one of the things we haven't touched on as much is innovation. And it's innovation that's happening on the ground, but it's also innovation in making sure that we are producing more and that production is actually more inclusive. So I think that there is a tremendous amount of potential. Somebody this morning made the great comment, you can't eat potential. And that's why we're here as partners to make sure that we're fostering that in a way that is done by communities themselves.
Thank you very much. We cannot eat potential, that's right. Okay, on to the next delegate, please. Just feel free, whoever wants to just jump in. Yes, from Norway.
Thank you for allowing me.
Some words of encouragement.
Okay, the discussion of, you brought up food security as a human right. Access to food is a human right we have not been able to provide for an increasing number of people throughout too many years. And I think one of the problem is how food has, I'm here as a representative of a development partner, but I'm also a politician. And I think part of the problem is that food as a commodity has been, any other commodity that's been transported around the world, but food is so much more. And that is why, what I like, this has been a great day. What I like the most about this whole conference, you know what it is? The title. The concept of food sovereignty has not been discussed on the global agenda for many, many years. But food sovereignty entails more than just food security. It is food security, but it also entails how governments can ensure their population's rights to access to food. Their toolbox, if you put it that way. And that opens up a whole, new world of potential for development, job creation, etc. And that will be my final word.
Thank you very much.
We are at a momentum now. There is a game changer going on globally because we are talking about food sovereignty, which entails a lot more than what we have discussed on food security up till now.
So food sovereignty is just as important as food security. Honorable Mitchell, would you like to leave any words of encouragement?
I think just to add that we talk about food as a human right. It's obviously an obligation on any leader at local or national level to make sure that the people whom they have the privilege to serve are fed and have access to food. And we should bring everything we bear, the work of the private sector, the work of all parts of the system, to make sure that we achieve the food aims that are behind this conference today. And I think also the point that was made about technology being very important and invention. The we put quite a lot of research and development in Britain behind the sweet potato, which can now grow in very climate-challenged conditions. And I'm very proud that that research meant that hundreds of thousands of people now, particularly children, are getting access to that. So we shouldn't forget the role of technology as well as all the other parts. And above all, we should remember the point about partnership, that we work together, that we have common games. It's not about any form of ideological or technical compulsion. It's about doing it together, working in partnership, and securing the gains and the victories that are behind the thrust of this conference today.
Excellent. So we must align on common goals. Dr. Al-Jasser, can you leave us with any words of encouragement?
Well, I was very happy to hear the heads of state making great commitments, including even confessions. I think that is a great start to really tackle the problem head on and achieve those goals. I don't think financing is a big issue. I think there is enough financing around. It's how to turn that financing into productive activity by small, medium, and large-scale food-producing enterprises. That is really going to be the challenge. And if the regulatory framework is going to be good enough to be more encouraging rather than discouraging for investing by domestic and international investors, then we will have this problem way under control.
So you're saying that the money is there, we have to direct it towards the right aim. Excellent. Thank you so much. And Monsieur Rioux, please.
Merci. Une remarque et un encouragement. La remarque, c'est, je pense qu'il faut cesser d'opposer la question des droits et la question du business. L'expérience de nos institutions, je crois, c'est qu'un projet qui fonctionne bien, qui a de l'impact, qui a du résultat, c'est parce qu'on a contribué à donner des droits aux gens, en fait. Et c'est comme ça qu'on trouve, qu'on crée de la valeur et qu'on crée de la valeur durablement. Donc ce qui est vraiment intéressant, c'est, j'allais dire, comment naissent les droits, en fait. Plus que les droits qui s'imposeraient comme ça, comme un impératif, c'est vraiment la dynamique qui naît de la reconnaissance et de l'encouragement des droits, en particulier des droits des femmes, évidemment, et des différentes communautés. Ça, c'était ma remarque dans notre discussion. Et mon encouragement, c'est vraiment à nouveau pour inviter tous les chefs d'État, les gouvernements, la Banque africaine de développement à tenir bon sur ce qui s'invente finalement ici, c'est-à-dire ce nouveau cadre, ces cadres nationaux, ces compacts, cet engagement des chefs d'État, cette gouvernance autour de la politique agricole, et avec l'assurance que les institutions, dont celle que je dirige, l'AFD, viendront s'inscrire, s'aligner dans ce cadre nouveau qui est en train de naître. Je pense que c'est extrêmement important pour éviter une fragmentation ou une dispersion des efforts et vraiment pouvoir montrer que la réalité change et que oui, la situation des populations s'améliore.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Mr. Kubota, can you tell us what can we take away from this conversation, this very robust engagement, please?
Well, as others said, and I always strongly felt this way, that the only JICA, only one agency can doing very little impact. So what we need is collaboration, effective collaboration to do the big things. That's my word.
Thank you very much. Excellent, excellent. I have so many questions, but there's just not enough time. Can we give a wonderful round of applause for these distinguished persons? Thank you very much, and that you may now exit the stage. Thank you so much. And I would now like to turn the floor over to Dr. Victor. Thank you so much for your attention, and I hope that this was just as wonderful for you and informative as it was for me. Thank you very much.